Welcome to the Down Dog Athletics Podcast, a competitor's guide to mental health and mastery, your resource for conversations around mental health and the mindsets necessary to master every area of your life. My name is Paul Klingen, and I'm a former Division I athlete that struggled with my mental health until I started yoga, which opened me up to other practices that gave me a balanced approach to my physical and mental health. The goal of this podcast is to inspire others to do the same, train and compete like an athlete, while also having the ability to slow down and practice stillness. When you can do both, you find balance and evolve into a greater version of yourself. What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the Down Dog Athletics Podcast. My name is Paul Klingen, and I'm your host. And today, we're going to do a solo episode, no guests, and I'm going to dive into a concept that I've been really baking and massaging in my head. I'm training for this marathon. I'm sure you guys have heard me talk about it a million times, but it's because I feel like I'm running every single day, which I am. So I have a lot of time to massage thoughts and concepts and philosophies in my head. And this particular one is really kind of the core foundation of what Down Dog Athletics is. When you look at my training principles and philosophy, when you look at how I coach, when you look at really what I believe in as a human and what I want to continue to get people to buy into with particularly like my method, is this concept of balance and how important it is. And so I've been massaging this thought of there is no right or wrong, only imbalance. And I'll give a little bit of context in it as I dive into some stories and some analogies to kind of help paint the picture. But if you go on social media, for example, you're going to get a slew of advice. One entrepreneur or coach is going to say you need to push harder, you need to go harder, you're selling yourself short. And so people see that and they're like, man, you're right, I need to go harder, I need to push harder. And some people do that and they get to a better spot. And then some people push harder and they absolutely burn out and they're not able to go any harder. And so someone on the other side is saying advice like, hey, you need to slow down. You need to sleep. You need to rest. You need to take time to practice introspection and get some awareness. And so who's right? Well, they're both right. They're both wrong. Your job as the consumer, as the listener, as the person is to develop more awareness on where you're at on a spectrum. So I'm going to take a step back and give you guys a little bit of an analogy of story. If you followed me, you know that I'm a huge Star Wars fan. And I draw a lot of parallels to how I run my business and how I, again, approach training. And really my philosophy with Down Dog Athletics is this concept of the light and the dark side. So I'm going to dive deep into a little bit of Star Wars lore knowledge. If you're not into Star Wars, you can fast forward. If you're into Star Wars, you're going to enjoy this. So there's the light and the dark side. You have the Jedi, you have the Sith. The Sith are going to be really emotional. They're going to be really aggressive. They're going to rely on their passions for their strength. And then a lot of times you look at the dark side people and you'll see them as evil. And they will be the ones driven by power, hungry by getting more. I kind of liken them to maybe like an animal that's just in this like dark side mode, gonna attack, gonna kill, no regard for any other life other than just continuing to live and thrive and seek that power. And then on the other side of the spectrum, you have the Jedi. They try not to feel emotions. They try not to have attachments. They're very peaceful. They're very dogmatic in how they see the world. And so when I look at that, I say, wow, there's things that the Jedi did really well. There's things that the Sith actually did really well in that they were emotional. They were aggressive. And there's times for that. I think a lot of times people run away from negative emotions. They try not to feel fear. They try not to feel hate. They try not to feel anger. And don't get me wrong, like hate is not a great emotion to be living in and then operating your feelings out of that. But what I will say is that 90-10 can be balanced. A little bit of fire heats the home. Too much fire is going to burn your house down. And so when I look at why the Jedi struggled, well, it was because they blocked out that emotion, because they didn't have the ability to go into maybe a little bit more dark side, a little bit more passion, and draw upon some of that for strength, for fuel, when they were just kind of really being passive. Whereas you look at the dark side and you can see easily how someone would be consumed by that and let their anger, fear, hatred really destroy them from the inside. And so there's always going to be rights and wrongs within that. Now, that 90-10 and that 50-50, both of them can help you establish balance. If you look at the concept of a ton of bricks and a ton of feathers, they both weigh a ton. And that's really the balance that I'm talking about here. So when I look at dark side and light side from a Down Dog Athletics perspective, well, I'm going to draw another analogy, or not really an analogy, but create another comparison. You have, from your nervous system standpoint, your parasympathetic, which I would say is really your light side. That's where you're in your rest and digest. That's when you're slow. That's when you're calm. That's when your heart rate is slowed down. That's when you're actually able to recover and sleep. And then you have your sympathetic side, which is when you are just spazzed out. Your heart rate's up high. You're really focused. Pupils are dilated. You're ready to go in and fight someone. You're ready to go in and hunt. You're ready to, when you're training, you're in that sympathetic state. And so there's always going to be the yin and the yang. You look at that symbol that really coincides with Eastern philosophy, right? The yin and the yang, you have the white and the black, and then you have within them the little circles. That's what I'm getting at right here. You need both in order for both to exist. I'll say that again. You need both in order for both to exist, because the more dark that you have, the more that light can shine. A nice summer is a lot nicer if you got a really bad winter, and the snow is going to feel nice when you're just getting cooked all the time. And so really trying to develop this idea that you need both. Both are good, but it is your job to understand where you are on your spectrum. Another good example from a training standpoint, if your quads are too strong and your hamstrings are too weak, what's going to do? It's going to eventually lead to injury. And that's what happens when you don't have balance. You lead to dysfunction. You lead to injury. You create situations where you need to go and slow down most of the time so that you can build better movement patterns, build better thought patterns. And that's kind of where I'm getting with this, is the mental and the physical, is slowing down so that you can build upon, add intensity to, increase speed to, more efficient movement patterns. You would never build, I'm downtown in Seattle, ton of buildings going up in the Amazon area. You don't want to build on a shaky foundation. And it takes slowing down to make sure that that foundation is solid, so that when you accelerate, so that when you add load, so that when you add stress to it, it's in a better place. So with everything I've painted, we've talked about the dark side and the light side. We've talked about the nervous system and how, from a scientific standpoint, right? I'm not just talking Star Wars and nerd stuff. I'm actually talking a little bit of scientific stuff. There's always going to be a balance, a yin and a yang. Now, when you look at it from a training standpoint, there's a physical and there's a mental. A lot of people neglect the mental. And for me, that mental is going to be things that are awareness driving, things that are still, things that really a yoga practice provides. And that's something that provided me and helped me get to a spot where I was able to recognize, wow, I relied too much on the physical. I relied too much on my dark side to grow, but you can only grow with that seesaw going left and right. You can only cut through that log to the degree at which you go left and right. You can't just go right, right, right. You can't just go left, left, left. That physical side, and that side that really Western civilization, especially in the United States, we're going to just hammer harder. Let's work faster. Let's work more. Let's go to 7 workouts in a week. Let's not sleep. Let's just burn ourselves out, and we don't give ourselves permission. And we know that it makes sense to. We know that it makes sense to be slow and still and meditate, yet we don't do it. And when we don't do it, the body eventually breaks down. You see that by really high rates of obesity. You see that in the mental health issues that we are seeing. And that's really where I'm getting at when I want to talk about the mental, because if you don't address the mental, then what happens? Well, you deteriorate. Same thing with the physical. A lot of people understand that they got to train their body physically, or that they got to have better nutrition. But when they neglect that, they deteriorate. Well, so now you have imbalance in the fact that people train physical more than training the mental. So what's going to happen, especially in this COVID era? That's when I'm recording this podcast. We're in the middle of COVID 2020. So you have the mental side deteriorating. So now people don't focus on the mental, but there's also a stigma about mental health. And I'm going to draw another analogy for you, because that's all I speak. I'm going to invent a language called analogy ease, and that's going to be what I maybe write a book on someday. And you go to a physical therapist because why? You get injured, and you need them to help give you exercises to fix that injury so that you can have more efficient movement patterns, so that you can get back to training, get back to working out, get back to feeling healthy. So same thing can happen from a mental standpoint. You get in a car accident, you experience something that's traumatic, or some sort of basically mental inefficiency that is causing you to think in a way that is not healthy. And so what should you do? Well, you go to a therapist. They help give you exercises, reframe things so that you can think in a more healthy way, and then you grow and go back to maybe a lot more healthy thought patterns. I'm always going to say you always got to sweep the floor. Every single day you got to work on your health, not just physical. You got to work on your health mental. Well, what happens when you don't? You deteriorate into these things. So I really like to draw this analogy of a physical therapist and a therapist, because if you don't work on both, you're going to be visiting them at some point. And I think a lot of people understand that if I break my leg, I need to go get surgery and I need to get help, and it's going to be a long process until I recover from that trauma. Well, what about the mental trauma that a lot of people undergo? And trauma really is going to be an injury to the brain that affects how the brain operates. That's not something to be ashamed of. That's something that you would want to go get help for, so that you can then go and handle situations in life that may be a little bit more stressful, that may put you in triggering moments, so that when you come across those, you respond to them in a healthy pattern. Same way from a physical sense, if I break my ankle and then I have to go run, I want my body to respond in a way that's going to allow it for me to take the next step and not hurt myself. And so that's really the analogy that I'm trying to draw with everything, is that I want to train the mind, I want to train the body, optimum physical and mental health, so that when I add speed, when I add load, when I add stress to it, it's healthy. And that's where I come to the slogan really for Down Dog Athletics as slow is smooth, smooth is fast. We've established the need for a dark and a light side. People have no problem going faster, but what I'm arguing for and what I'm encouraging you to do is slow down and explore the light side, explore the side that has more awareness, so that you can recalibrate, recenter, and re-engage toward whatever it is that you're actually working towards. But so many people don't even have the awareness of where they are, so they don't really have the ability to get anywhere because they don't have the awareness of where they're at on their own spectrum. They don't know that advice from one side really isn't good because they're already too far to the right, whereas they need to be listening to someone that is on the other side of the spectrum. Maybe it's a little bit more light. And don't get me wrong, I think a lot of the problems that society has is they're not working hard enough, and so they need a little bit of the dark side. They need a little bit more motivation. They need a little bit more drive so that they can get a little bit more balance. But the more balanced you get, the more you create the opportunity for yourself to evolve. And so in conclusion, the big things that I want you to take away from this could be that Star Wars is cool, and you should check it out if you haven't watched it yet. But it's this concept of the light and the dark side. And there's no right and there's no wrong. There's only imbalance. Your job is to find out what you need more of so that you can fix that imbalance. And that's it. That's what I got for you guys today on this solo episode of the Down Dog Athletics podcast. If you have any questions, if you want to talk about something, if you want feedback, if you want to work together in a coaching capacity, just email me, paul@downdogathletics.com, or visit downdogathletics.com to get in contact with me. And the last thing I'll leave you guys with, and what this podcast really is rooted in, is that it is not bad, it is not shameful to go and get help from a mental health standpoint with your mental health. Even if it is just talking to someone, there's a reason why you poke holes in a potato before you throw it in the oven, because if you don't, it's going to explode. And that's what happens to so many people, is they just bury emotion, bury energy. We were talking about the dark side and the Sith. If there's one good thing you want to do, sometimes you got to let those emotions flow. And when you release that energy, then you unblock things, then you're able to get more dialed into whatever it is that you want to get more out of in life. So if that means talking to someone, if that means opening up to a friend, family member, seeing a therapist, I encourage you to do any and all of that. I want you to be as healthy in the mind and in the body as possible, but everything is always going to start upstairs. The most talented, coordinated people, that's all happening as neural pathways in the brain that they've trained. You got to do the same with your mind as well. Catch you guys next time on the Down Dog Athletics podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Have an awesome day.